I had just given birth when my 8-year-old daughter ran into the hospital room, her eyes wide and alert. She closed the curtains, then whispered right against my ear, "Mom, get under the bed." Right now, my heart clenched, but I did as she said. The two of us lay close together beneath the bed, trying to keep our breaths as quiet as possible. Suddenly, heavy footsteps entered the room. Just as I tried to look out, she gently covered my mouth. Her eyes filled with a fear I had never seen before, and then, the instant Rebecca slipped into the hospital room, her small sneakers barely making a sound on the linoleum floor, I sensed something was wrong. She was only 8, but her eyes, usually bright with mischief, were wide, sharp, and terrified. She pressed a finger to her lips, rushed forward, and with surprising strength pulled the curtains shut. The newborn slept in the bassinet, unaware of the sudden tension filling the room. "Mom," she whispered, leaning so close her breath trembled against my cheek, "get under the bed." Right now, I had given birth barely 2 hours earlier. My body still felt like it didn't belong to me, every movement thick and slow, but her urgency cut through everything. My pulse jumped. I didn't question her. Something in her tone, steady but breaking, told me she wasn't playing, wasn't imagining things, wasn't being dramatic. We slipped beneath the hospital bed together, shoulder to shoulder. The space was tight, cold, smelling faintly of disinfectant and metal. Rebecca's small hands clenched the blanket with such force her knuckles went white. I wanted to ask what was happening. But before I could get a word out, she shook her head fiercely. Then came the footsteps, heavy, confident, purposeful. They entered the room without hesitation, the soles pressing into the tile with a rhythm too slow to belong to a nurse rushing between patients. Every step made Rebecca flinch. She grabbed my hand in both of hers and pressed it against her chest, her heart thudding hard against my palm. I angled my head to peek out, but Rebecca covered my mouth gently, her wide eyes pleading with me not to move, not to breathe too loudly. I had never seen that kind of fear on her face, raw and filtered, protective. The footsteps stopped right beside the bed. Silence followed, thick enough to suffocate. Then the mattress dipped ever so slightly overhead, as if the person had placed a hand there for balance. I could hear breathing now, slow, deliberate, controlled in a way that made my skin crawl. The figure leaned closer to the bed, casting a moving shadow against the floor, inching slowly toward where we were hiding. And then Rebecca's grip tightened painfully as the shadow shifted. I could feel her trembling beside me, but she didn't dare make a sound. I forced myself to breathe quietly, my ribs aching with the effort. My newborn son, Ethan, made a soft fussing noise from the bassinet, and I felt panic spike. The footsteps paused, then turned toward him. I recognized the walk, not the sound. No, but the hesitation. My ex-husband, Daniel, had a particular way of stopping mid-step when he was assessing a situation. Even before I saw his shoes, expensive leather, polished too well for a hospital visit, I knew it was him. My entire chest tightened. He wasn't supposed to be here. A restraining order had been issued weeks earlier after the last violent argument. He had been furious when he learned I was pregnant again and had sworn I would regret choosing to move on. Rebecca had seen him before I did. That must have been why she ran in, why she insisted I hide. I could hear him breathing over Ethan's crib. A drawer opened. Slowly, metal instrument shifted inside. For a terrifying moment, I imagined the worst. Then a nurse's voice called from down the hallway, room 417. "Are you still inside?" Daniel froze. The handle of the drawer clicked back into place. His footsteps moved quickly, quiet but hurried. The door opened just enough for him to slip out, and then it shut. Rebecca let out a shaky exhale and buried her face into my shoulder, squeezing her eyes shut. I wrapped an arm around her, even though everything in my body protested the movement. After a few moments, when the hallway remained quiet, I crawled out from under the bed. My legs wobbled, but adrenaline kept me steady. I went straight to the door and locked it, then pressed the call button for a nurse. A security team arrived within minutes. The nurse's face turned pale when she learned who had entered and how easily he blended in. Cameras confirmed his presence. He had slipped into the maternity ward wearing a visitor's badge that wasn't his. Rebecca stood beside me the entire time, refusing to let go of my hand. I saw him down the hall. She whispered to the security officer. He looked mad. I didn't know what else to do. "You did exactly the right thing," I told her, voice breaking, but the fear didn't leave because Daniel knew I had given birth, and worse, he had almost gotten to us. The hospital moved quickly. Security stationed a guard outside the door. Nurses checked on it. Every hour, the pediatrician insisted on moving Ethan's bassinet closer to my bed, as though keeping him within arm's reach might erase what had happened. But the image of Daniel standing over my newborn lingered like a cold stain on the back of my mind. That evening, Detective Mark Hollies arrived. His presence was calm, steady, the kind of grounding I desperately needed. He listened carefully as I explained what happened, scribbling notes while occasionally glancing toward Rebecca, who sat curled in one of the chairs, hugging her knees. "You said he wasn't supposed to know you were giving birth today," Mark said. How might he have found out? My breath hitched. I thought back. Messages, appointments, anyone who might have mentioned it in passing. My mother posted something on Facebook. I whispered, "Just a photo of the baby clothes she bought." She tagged me. He still follows her. Rebecca's shoulders sagged, the fear twisting into guilt. I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "This isn't your fault." I murmured, "None of it." Mark nodded. "We'll increase patrols near your house. You'll be discharged tomorrow, but you won't be alone. And we'll move fast on the warrant for his arrest." It helped, not completely, but enough to breathe. That night, Rebecca climbed into the hospital bed beside me, careful not to disturb Ethan. She rested her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't tell the nurse sooner. I didn't want him to see me run." I kissed the top of her head. "You saved us." "You were brave when I couldn't be." She nodded, but I could still feel the tension in her tiny body. The room was dim except for the glow of the hallway light under the door. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to cry. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything we had survived. I held both of my children close, promising silently that I would never let him hurt us again. Rebecca eventually fell asleep. I stayed awake, watching the slow rise and fall of her breaths, listening to Ethan's soft murmurs. Tomorrow would bring police reports, safety plans, and a new life defined by boundaries and vigilance. But it would also bring hope, a fragile, stubborn kind that refuses to be extinguished. The next morning began with a kind of heaviness that no amount of sleep could shake off. Nurses entered the room quietly, their voices softer than usual, as if they understood the fragile atmosphere surrounding us. Rebecca sat up in the chair, blinking sleepily, while Ethan fussed in his bassinet. Detective Mark returned just after sunrise. His expression was serious, but not unkind. He spoke with a tone that balanced professionalism and empathy, a rare mix that kept me steady. "We located your ex-husband's car near the hospital last night," he said. "He left the area before the patrol team arrived. We're working on tracing his movements." My stomach twisted. Does that mean he could come back? "It's possible," Mark admitted, "but that's why you're getting escorted home. We'll install temporary security until the order is enforced and he's taken into custody." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. She looked pale, exhausted, older somehow. I hated that she had seen so much in such a short span of time. After Mark left, the discharge process began. Papers, instructions, signatures. I held Ethan against my chest, his tiny fingers curling around mine with a gentleness that hurt. The contrast between his innocence and the danger hovering around us felt almost unbearable. When the wheelchair arrived to take us downstairs, Rebecca insisted on walking beside me. She kept glancing around, doorways, corners, windows, as if Daniel could emerge from any place at any time. I wished I could tell her she was being overly cautious, but I couldn't, not after yesterday. Outside the hospital, 2 patrol officers stood waiting beside a marked car. They helped us inside before loading the diaper bag, flowers, and the blanket we'd been gifted. As the doors shut, I noticed Rebecca finally relax, just a little. When she realized we were protected, the ride home was quiet. The streets passed in a blur, and every familiar landmark suddenly felt unfamiliar under the weight of our circumstances. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt a mixture of comfort and dread. Home should have meant safety, yet now it carried the shadow of someone who wanted to violate it. One of the officers walked us inside, checked the locks, the windows, the backyard gate. Rebecca hovered close to me, watching him with a seriousness far beyond her age. That first hour home should have been peaceful, but it wasn't, because on the kitchen counter, right where I always left my purse, was a folded piece of paper that none of us had put there, and the handwriting on the outside was unmistakably Daniel's. My hands trembled as I reached for the folded paper. The officer immediately stopped me. "Ma'am, let me handle that," he said, putting on gloves before picking it up gently. He unfolded it while Rebecca clung to my side, her face buried against my arm. As the officer's eye scanned the page, his jaw tightened. "What does it say?" I whispered. He hesitated, then read aloud. "You can hide from me in hospitals, behind police, under beds, but sooner or later, you'll have to walk alone. And when you do, we'll finish what we started." Rebecca sobbed softly. I felt numb, cold, like every ounce of warmth had drained from my body. "Has he been inside the house?" I asked. The officer inspected the counter, the locks, the back door. "There's no sign of forced entry. He may have had a copy of the old key." I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. My home, my safe space, had been invaded without a single sound. The officer called for backup and requested immediate surveillance. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived. They swept the house room by room, Ethan's nursery, my bedroom, the attic, the garage. Every time they opened a door, I felt myself stiffen. "No one is here," one of the officers finally said, "but we'll stay outside in shifts." I sat on the couch, Ethan sleeping in my arms, Rebecca leaning into my shoulder. Her voice was barely audible. "Mom, is he going to come back? I swallowed hard. They won't let him." And neither will I. But the truth was, fear sat inside me like a stone. Detective Mark arrived shortly after the officers reported the note. He took photos, collected fingerprints, and asked a series of questions. What time we last left home, whether anything else looked disturbed, who else had access. "What scares me," Mark said quietly, "is how calculated this is. He's not just acting on impulse, he's planning." "Is that worse?" I asked. "It means he's patient," he answered, "and patient people are unpredictable." Those words stayed with me long after he left. Evening fell. The officers remained outside, visible through the living room window. The house felt unnaturally quiet, like it was holding its breath. I laid Ethan down gently, then sat beside Rebecca on the edge of my bed. She took my hand. "Mom, we're going to be okay, right?" I looked into her tired eyes and forced a steady breath. "Yes," I said, "because we're going to fight back." But when the power suddenly flickered, once, twice, my confidence shattered, and the house plunged into darkness. The blackout lasted only a second before the emergency power kicked in, but that second was enough to send panic through my veins. I rushed to the hallway, heart pounding, while Rebecca stood frozen in the doorway of my room. "Stay with me," I told her, grabbing her hand. The officers outside noticed the outage instantly. Their flashlights scanned the yard, the windows, the street. One approached the door and knocked firmly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The entire block lost power. We're checking the perimeter. I exhaled shakily. At least the outage wasn't targeted at us, or at least that's what I hoped. We gathered in the living room while the officers inspected the exterior. Rebecca curled up against me, her breathing uneven. Ethan slept in his crib, somehow unaware of the tension suffocating the room. Detective Mark returned, unannounced but not unwelcome. "I figured you might need extra eyes tonight," he said. "Mind if I stay a while?" Relief washed over me. "Please." He sat across from us, hands clasped. "I've seen cases like this before," he said slowly. "Not identical, but similar patterns, stalking mixed with emotional fixation. Men like Daniel usually escalate when they feel they're losing control." I felt a chill run down my spine. "So what do we do?" "You follow everything we recommend," Mark replied. "Security upgrades, a temporary relocation if needed. And you don't go anywhere alone." Rebecca listened silently, absorbing every word. Mark continued. "He left that note because he wants you afraid. He wants control. But fear isn't power unless you give it to him." I looked at my sleeping newborn, at my brave daughter, and felt something shift inside me, a resolve I hadn't realized I still had. "You won't face this alone," Mark added. "We'll be with you every step." It was the first time all day I felt a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but real. The officers returned after completing the sweep. "Everything's clear," they reported, "but we'll stay on the street overnight." Eventually, the house calmed. Rebecca fell asleep beside me, exhaustion finally winning. Mark stepped outside to coordinate with the patrol, leaving me a moment alone in the quiet. I walked to Ethan's crib and touched his tiny hand. Then I whispered to myself, maybe as a promise, maybe as a warning, this ends with us getting our lives back, not with fear winning. And now I'm curious. The night dragged on like a slow, suffocating fog. Even with the officers outside and the hum of the emergency lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves were listening, waiting. Rebecca slept curled against my side, her small hand fisted in the fabric of my shirt, as if letting go might pull me away from her. Ethan's tiny breaths floated through the room, soft and rhythmic, the only innocent sound in the darkness. It was just after midnight when Detective Mark stepped back inside. His hair was slightly damp, from fog or stress I didn't know, and he spoke in a low, calm voice. "We've secured the perimeter again. Still no sign of him." I nodded, though my stomach refused to unclench. "Do you think he's nearby?" "I think," Mark said carefully, "that Daniel wants you to believe he is, whether or not it's true." I hugged my arms around myself. That note wasn't just to scare me. He came inside the house. He was close. And that's exactly why we're not leaving you unprotected. Mark said, "I have an idea, but I need your permission." And my heartbeat tripped. What kind of idea? A temporary relocation. He said, somewhere he can't predict, somewhere safe, somewhere with controlled access, only for a few days, just long enough for us to track him down. Rebecca stirred at my side, but didn't fully wake. I brushed her hair back and whispered, "Let me think." Mark nodded and stepped toward the hallway to give me space. But before he reached the door, something made him stop. A faint sound, soft, almost insignificant, but not to him. He held up a hand immediately. Silent command. My breath froze. He tilted his head, listening so intently even the air seemed to pause. I didn't hear it at first. Then I did, a tap, just one, on the living room window. My blood turned to ice. Mark moved slowly, controlled, quiet. Toward the front of the house, he peered through the curtain, just enough for a sliver of vision. And then his entire body stiffened. "Stay back." He murmured, "Don't come closer. Don't make a sound." My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. Rebecca shifted awake beside me. "Mom," she whispered in a tiny, frightened voice. I pressed a finger to her lips and held her close. Mark took a step backward, eyes still fixed on whatever he saw outside. "What is it?" I mouthed. He didn't answer, not at first. Then he inhaled deeply, jaw tightening. "He left something on your porch," he whispered. I felt my insides clench. What kind of something? Mark swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "A baby blanket." My breath left me in a choke of disbelief. "Ethan's no, he never had it. He couldn't. It's not from your house," Mark said quietly. "This one. It's new, clean, folded, left intentionally." "Why?" I whispered, shaking. Mark finally turned toward me, his expression dark and unflinching. "Because it has a message pinned to it." I didn't want to ask, I didn't want to know, but terror has a way of demanding the truth even when the truth feels toxic. "What does it say?" My voice trembled. Mark hesitated, then answered, "Tell Mark to stop interfering." My entire world tilted. He knew Mark was here. He knew Mark was involved. He knew far more than he should. Rebecca gasped quietly, understanding more than her 8. Your old heart ever should. "This isn't random anymore," Mark said, voice low and steady. "This is targeted. He's watching the house." My throat tightened. "Where is he now?" Mark scanned the windows again. "I don't know, but I'm not taking any chances." He reached for his radio. "All units, code 5. He was here within seconds." A rapid burst of voices crackled through. Mark turned back to me. "You need to pack essentials. Clothes, formula, documents. Only what you can carry quickly." My pulse hammered. "Where are we going?" "A safe house," Mark said. Now, Rebecca clung to me. Why? Died and shaking. Ethan began to fuss in his crib as if sensing the fear. I gathered them both, holding them tightly. The house felt smaller by the second, shrinking, closing in, as though someone outside was tightening a noose around it. As I moved to the bedroom to grab a bag, my gaze caught on the window. For a second, only a second, I thought I saw movement in the reflection. A shape, a person, watching. My skin prickled, the hairs on my arms lifting. Daniel was no longer just a threat. He was here, he was waiting, and he wanted us to know it. Mark appeared at my side, protective and firm. "We're leaving," he said, "right now." But before we took a single step toward the door, a loud bang came from the side of the house. Rebecca screamed. Ethan wailed. My knees nearly buckled. Mark drew his weapon. Go to the back room and stay down." My pulse thundered in my ears as I ran, clutching my children, because the bang wasn't distant. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, and it came from the direction of the nursery window.